Hi Sven. Hi Sebastian.
Hello there.
Welcome to Heisenbug. How is there?
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, doing well here.
That's great. That's great. So, actually, this talk is marked in our timetable as a talk for experienced engineer. And we may have some junior engineers also listening to this talk. And I have a question to you. What do you recommend? What is required skill set for our more junior engineers to understand everything in your talk? What do you think?
What I think is basics of software development and core Java. And if he is the guy who has to map it, all this other stuff around.
Okay, that's really good. What do you think, Sebastian? The same?
Yeah, well, that is always good. I think that's always also a good skill set to have, and probably just the maybe curiosity to learn something new, right? Because Sven, I guess, is going to connect a lot of different technologies, and then if we're just open-minded to be open for learning something new, I think that's also always a good skill set to have.
Yeah, I believe that our listeners they are very curious to know new stuff. And that's why they come to our conference. So, if you are ready, then let's start.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the talk Web Components for the Java developers. As you can see, I'm in the German forest right now, and I will take you with me to two journeys. One journey through the forest, and the second journey is how to make Web Components available on the server side for Java developers, and how you can test it and what we can do around this stuff. If you're interested in this, stay tuned. What do we want to do first? First, we want to have a look on Web Components. What are Web Components and how to use them? So Web Components is more or less a standard, or it is a standard for different web browsers. And the good thing is, if you remember the old days of web development, it's more or less like have different browsers, different operating systems. Everything was just a mess. To have a website that is looking good on all these different resolutions, browsers, operating systems. And this leads to a lot of effort if you want to create a web UI. And the main thing here is that the industry finally got it solved and created a web standard based on HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. But what are Web Components? Web Components are more or less, you can see like a special HTML tag that you can use inside your HTML website. And then you can use this like a Lego brick. So if you have a button, if you have a table, if you have a badge or whatever, it is a special tag. And this tag can be combined with other tags. So the idea is that with Web Components, you are building a component system, something like Swing, something like JavaFX, or whatever technology is familiar for you. And it helps you to use different components from different vendors. And this will open the door that you can just grab the component you need and you can combine them. So Web Components are able to have children, and the children is a complex attribute. It's a web component itself. So altogether, you can now start building, based on web components, complex graphical user interfaces. The main target is that you are limited to 3 technologies: HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS. CSS just for the colors and sizing. HTML5 is for the structure itself, and JavaScript for interaction. And this is one thing, that they are focusing on the client side. So web components are just focusing on the client side inside the browser. And this leads to client-side apps. The next evolution would be, or is, a progressive web app. A progressive web app is based on web components and with HTML5 features, so that you have the possibility to store a state on the client side, to interact with the operating system, to have limited access to system calls, and so on. Altogether, it is a target that with web components, and if you are building with web components progressive web apps, that you have this app of a native, this feeling of a native app. So it should be no difference anymore between a mobile app, for example, and a progressive web app. This is a target, and in general, this is a good approach. So I don't want to say this is a bad approach, but assume that you are a web developer or a Java developer that is mostly focusing on the server side. And on the server side, you have to deal with databases, and maybe you are creating REST API or whatever, so that other services can consume your service or your whatever you are coding. And now you have the challenge that you have to write a graphical user interface for your service. And it must be a web app. So otherwise you could go to Swing or JavaFX or whatever. So if you have to create now a graphical user interface as a Java server-side developer, and it must be a web app, then mostly it's not so convenient for you. So you have to deal now with 3 different technologies: HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. And this is, well, it's you can work with these, but I often saw that server-side developers don't like this one. And there's another challenge based on the pure client-side approach, that if you have a complex application or a complex application state, it's not so easy to hold the state and to communicate with stateless servers. So sometimes it really depends on the use case, but sometimes it's really convenient if you have a server-side state, so that you can do all the stuff on this side. And other approach on other topic is security, for example. Security means that if you have a server-side state, then even if a button is disabled on a compromised user interface, and this compromised user interface will just set a button clicked, then on the server side you have this state and you can just ignore this request. So altogether means we have now this web component. A lot of browsers, nearly all new browsers are supporting web components as a standard. We have these 3 technologies: HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS. And we want to have it accessible on the server side for a Java developer. And the main target is that you as a Java developer can just say, I want to have a new button. You're writing new button in the way you are used to it. And on the graphical user interface, you will have a button. And then you can add a click listener, or you can set a property as a text or whatever. So this is the target. And the good thing is there is a solution. The good thing is it is an open source solution, and the effort you have to do is not so much. And I will show you how to deal with this mapping. There are just a few other words. We will talk a little bit about the topic security later, because as you can imagine, if we have web components and we have the web component stack, we have to deal with new technologies like Npm and other package managers as well. So, but this will be done later. Now we want to first change the location, and second we want to talk a little bit more about this mapping process itself. See you in a second. Okay, we saw now that web components are based on HTML5, CSS and JavaScript. So the next question is, if you want to have it on the server side, what do we need, or what components we want to have, or what layers we want to have? First of all, the web component itself is a pure client side, as I mentioned before, and it's based on HTML5, JavaScript and CSS, and there is nothing else. But with JavaScript, you have the possibility to interact with other components. You have full access to a web stack or to a communication stack, let's say it like this. The next thing is, if you want to have it now on the server side, what do we need? We have this web component. We need some kind of communication, and we need a Java class that is representing this element or this component. So in general, it means this communication could be done, for example, with JavaScript. It could be done from the Java side, and then we need this one-to-one mapping. If you're looking at different technologies, what we had before, like struts or wicket or whatever, then every time if they wanted to go to this component world, let's say wicket, this Apache wicket, they have this component, but what you should do, or what you have to do, is you're creating this HTML template, and on the other side you're creating more or less the same Java class, and then there was this mapping. So the technology how to map or how to communicate to both directions is available since a long time. The same with Tapestry. It's a component-oriented web UI system as well. So we have all this, and we had some kind of technology already if you're looking at this GWT world. So GWT gave you the possibility of a rich client, and the main thing here was that this GWT was emulating an abstracted runtime environment, so that inside this GWT world you had the possibility to create in a generic way your graphical interfaces. The main thing was that with this GWT that you wrote some Java code, then it was a transpiler that was creating all this stuff around, so the communications, the runtime environment that is implemented inside the browser. And with web components, we don't need this runtime environment anymore, so we can get rid of this one and we can just connect to the web components itself. And this is a good approach, or this is helping a lot if you're looking at this topic testing. For example, if you want to test a GWT environment, then you have this transpiling process. You have to generate everything for every change. So this is a very time-consuming thing. So the main thing here is now we need this web component on the client side, we need some kind of communication, and we need the Java side. If we're extending to the testing part, then we need some kind of test element as well. Why? If I want to test Java FX application, for example, so I'm contributed to this open source tool called TestFX, and what we are doing here is we are ramping up the whole application. We have it inside the JVM, inside the memory, and then we can just go through this object graph and we can invoke methods, we can read properties and so on. But with a web component, to test this one properly, what you have is you have some kind of environment. It could be a browser, it could be a servlet container, and then a browser is consuming this environment. And then you need something that is redirecting requests to this browser. And for this, mostly Selenium is used. But we will cover this topic later. Just as an overview, or just as an idea in the beginning, what I need is, if I am able to map this web components to the Java side, it would be good if we are mapping this testing part, the Selenium part, to the Java side as well. We will have this one later. Now we are just focusing on the communication, the Java side, and inside the Java side, the Java component and the test component just as a placeholder. The good thing here is that most of this work is already done and is available as open source framework. And the open source framework I'm mentioning here is Vaadin Flow. Vaadin is a Finnish company, and they're creating this server-side approach for web components or web apps since a long time. The previous technology stage from them was based on GWT, and with web components they switched to this technology, got rid of this GWT stack and this transpiling and this long-running dev cycle. And now what we have is we have this Flow. Vaadin Flow is a server-side implementation, or the server-side implementation of it. And if you're looking inside this API, you can see that they have done exactly the same stuff for themselves. So they have a bunch of web components. If you don't want to use this web component, there's nothing that will push you to use this web components. If you don't want, I will show you how to map third-party components against this. But if you're looking inside this API, you will see that they have this abstraction layer already, and they have the possibility to give you this communication part and a base implementation for the Java part. But to understand the whole mapping phase, we want to have a look at this pure client-side technologies and commands we need here on this one, and we will have a look on the corresponding Java side as well. And for this, we'll change the location and see you in a minute. Hello again. So, what we want to have now? Now we want to have a look at the base technologies that are used to consume a web component, because we need to understand this one if we want to map it to the technology we want to have, and this case is Java. So, first of all, the web components I'm using here are from SAP UI5 Web Components. Why? They are open source. They are with industrial relevance, because I assume a few people will have customers that are using SAP and SAP UI5 look and feel. And with this one, you're now able to create exactly for this one plug in some subservice and administrative overview, graphical user interface, whatever. So SAP UI5, I think the link is sap.github.com, but I will give you the link here in this video. So the main thing is what should you do, or what you have to do if you want to use or consume web components. First of all, you have something like an Npm Install. Npm Install is something like Maven Install. What will happen? It will, if you have this Npm Install and then the address of this web component package, means that you will get all web components from the registry to your local machine in a local repository, and inside this local repository you are able to hold it for different requests. You can compare it with Maven, for example. If you have an address in, or if you have a group and artifact ID in your POM XML, then exactly the same stuff will happen. It will go to the Maven Central, will collect this stuff, store it in .m2 folder. The same with Npm Install. If you have this one, you need to make it available inside your HTML5 or in your HTML website. And for this you need something like an import statement. Import and then explicit the component you want to have. So this Npm Install is grabbing the whole component bundle. It could be one component, it could be a whole composition of components. And with import you're just making this single component available inside your website. It's comparable to a Java import statement. If you want to have a hash map, you have to write import and then the full qualified name for this hash map. If you have this one, the next thing is an HTML5 or an HTML page is structured with tags. And for this you have a dedicated tag, and this tag corresponds to the web component you're just using. For example, if you're importing an UI5 batch, then the corresponding tag, for example, would be something like UI5 badge. The tag itself is defined by the creator of this web component, and all the other things is more or less available via, for example, this npm registry. So if you are looking at webcomponents.org, you're selecting some web component you want to have in mind you have this npm install to have it on your local machine, you have an import in your HTML5 page, and then you need this tag. And now we want to map all this stuff to the Java side, because there we want to have it mapped, and then we can start thinking about how to use it, how to compose more complex things, and, for example, how to test this one. And for this, I'm just running to the next location. I'm exploring here this forest, and it's a nice one, but I think soonish we will see some other parts of it. So this one is more this kind of trees and this kind of stuff here. Okay, so see you in the next place. So, as you can see, we switched the location, so we are now in a different part of the forest. Yeah, we have these more higher trees here, and if you can see here, there's some part. In this you normally find some wild black pigs. I don't know the English name, but yeah, we saw a few. They just run away, so that's good. So now I can stay here and just wait. Yeah, sun is here. Perfect place. And what we want to see now is we talk about the different components of this web components from this front up to the server side, and now I want to explain how to map this one the practical point of view. So what you can see here, so I need my iPad now, because I just have too many parts with source code now. I can't do it without my iPad. So okay, what I want to show here is, for example, if you're going to this web page of SAP UI5, you will see that they have different components. Every component will have some examples, so you can see what attributes and properties are there, and if you can have complex childs, and so on and so on. And the example I want to show here is a very easy one, for sure, for this talk, is the badge. And the badge can have different colors, can have a text, can have an icon. So how to map this one? If we are remembering what was the main technical step here, is that we have to map these technical phases of npm install, of this import statement and the tag definition to the Java world. So now I will switch a bit, otherwise the sun is just too much. Hopefully this one is now a little bit better. The sun is coming up, and wow, slowly it's getting warm. Fantastic, but it should be winter, so we are waiting for snow. But back to the point. So we have npm install. This must be mapped, and this is done with a Vardin flow framework with an annotation npm package. And then you have this address of this web component bundle and the version. With npm install, you can just have indirectly this latest version. Here you just have to fix it to a dedicated version. And it makes sense. You have one tested version, so nail it down. The next one is the import. The import statement is a JS module, and then you have the specific address of one component, and then you have this add tag annotation, and here you're defining what is the name of this tag. So looking at the slides here, it just shows you that you have a one-to-one transformation from the documentation you will see at the web component page, and you can transform them to the corresponding annotations. This is very convenient because you don't have to map, you don't have to recreate stuff, you can just push it one by one. So the next step would be how to use these annotations. These annotations I use on class level, and the parent class, or the class you should extend, is a class called component. Component itself is a generic representation of this web component from the Vaadin Flow framework, and here you have all these generic methods. So with this point you have now a class. In this example is UI5 badge, extends component. Now you have the basic behavior of this component. You have already the communication, this long polling stuff, you have push. All these techniques are already mapped. By the way, Vaadin Flow is internally using the Atmosphere framework for this communication to the web component itself. So everything you can do with Atmosphere, you can do also with Vaadin Flow. Just if you have some challenges here with long polling, with routers or whatever, check the Atmosphere documentation. This is way better than the Vaadin documentation at this point. So the next thing is, I have now this class, I have these 3 annotations. With these 3 annotations, I am mapping this corresponding technology steps and how to deal with attributes. Every web component has this generic mechanism, and this is you have a getter and a setter, and the attributes is the name of the attribute you want to set and the value, or if you want to get it, just the name of the attribute, and then you will get it as a string. So here the example is UI5 badge, and here we have this color scheme and we want to set it. It is an int, but on the client side it's mapped like a string, so you can just do it like a string in the beginning. And here we have this set method, and to set this property or this attribute property, it's from component, from the class component, you should use the method getElement. GetElement will give you the generic representation of a component. Why they have mapped this one, I don't know. But there is this component, this generic one, and with getElement you have this element of this component, this generic representation, and then you can use, for example, the method setProperty. What you need is the name of the property and the value itself. At this point, you should start thinking about how to make it type safe, more type safe. So in my example, I'm just using a string, or what you can do if you have a limited amount here, and this is with color scheme, I think they have just 10 or so. I just created an enumeration, and then I'm using this enumeration here, and this is my way in this example to make it more type safe, but you can imagine if you have different attributes, you should have a different way to make this one work on type safety. But setting a property is one thing, getting a property is the next one, and here it's exactly the same. What you're doing is you're using the method getElement again, and then instead of setProperty, just a getProperty, and then the name itself. Here you can see that this name of this attribute, it's just good advice. Make a constant out of it so that they are refactoring safe. Don't use these plain strings. I'm just using it here to show what it is and to minimize the code example at this point. We have now the possibility to get and set attributes of a web component, and the magic of transferring from this Java class, from the state to the client-side one, and from the client-side back is completely covered by the Vaadin Flow implementation. That is a very convenient thing. One interesting part should be now how to deal with more complex attributes. So setting a property with a int or string is not really challenging. But here in the example, you can set an icon. An icon itself is a complex attribute. It means it's not one of these basic types you can just map to a string. The behavior is just the same. You have this icon. They have a bunch of icons in SAP UI5. So the first thing would be UI5 icon as a class extends component. Then you're doing exactly the same with npm package, JS module, and the tag annotation. Then you have this icon. And with this icon, what you can do now is that you can use this one for your set attributes, set UI5 icon. And now you're not going over the method get and set property, because you have a complex attribute. The next thing or the method to use is that you're now appending a child. And this is again getElement for the generic representation, and then append child. and from this UI5 icon, you're just grabbing the getElement method. This is an indirect, and I personally don't like at this API. It is always doing something getElement, but they have done it. On the other side, if you don't like it, you can just make it in your API in a way that is convenient for you. So you can just delegate it, for example. But we have now the possibility to create a tree of web components, a complex tree of web components. And this is just amazing, because with this one, you are now able to create tables, trees, interactive maps, whatever, because you can just append child or remove child, and this is just working. If everything is just a web component internally, you can just go and create your tree now. And with this, you have the possibility to add action listener, checking for properties, and so on and so on. And the cool stuff is, if you're on the Java side and you're building the tree on the Java side, you can use even techniques like reflection to analyze the tree, to modify the tree, and so on. The next thing I want to show is the convenience part of it. So what we reach with this one and how it looks like for a developer. And for this, I will switch the location. So up to the next part of the mountain forest. And I saw there a little bit different part of the forest. It will take some time, but see you in a second. Okay, so the last thing what we had was just setting complex attributes, and what we reach now with this one is that we can build a type-safe and convenient API for your colleagues or for yourself. So here in this slide, I just show you the example from the badge, and what we can do now is, instead of writing npm, css, whatever things, we can just say new UI5 badge with a class, just like a swing, like a Java affix class. And with this, we can now use a getter and setter to set this one. If we build a type-safe API with UI5 icons, with enumerations, and so on, we are able to use all the power of the Java language to create in a convenient way the graphical interface. The good thing is that you have the freedom now to build a functional interface and an object-oriented interface. You can even deal with reactive here at this point. So if you are dealing with observer pattern, all this stuff, because if there is a property change, the Vaadin Flow framework will take care of this one and push this one with a push mechanism to the client side. So this is a cool thing. And at this point, we are ready to deal with a full stack. And the next one would be, for example, an example how to deal with an UI5 switch. A switch is now a little bit more, slightly more complicated web component, because we have the state, we have the slide, and all this stuff. But in the end, it's just in the same way. We are just grabbing these three tags, npm, JS module, and tag. We're extending from component, and what I'm showing here is just one of the best practice. I would recommend that everything, all property names or all attribute names and so on, that you're just using constants instead of using plain strings. So one thing that is interesting, if you are now on the Java side, you can use not only Java for it, you can use Kotlin as well. There is, for example, for the existing Vaadin components, we have this Kotlin DSL, it's Caribou DSL, and with this one, you have the possibility to use this type-safe builders from Kotlin to write a DSL for your graphical user interface. And here, this is just an example. You have this button create, on left click, person, and so on. And then you have this nested builder structure. So mapping to Java means that you have Kotlin as well, Scala as well, and so on. So you can, from this point of view, you can switch the language and dealing with a language that is convenient for you inside the JVM. Kotlin is running really, really well with this. And there's one thing that is I just want to highlight, we will have a look at this testing part later, but there is this URL vardin on kotlin.eu, and there you will find the official documentation. It's maintained by, it's an open source project, and it's maintained by one employee from Vardin, but in his free time. So it's really an open source and private project, but it is a very good one. And in addition to step here, what we want to have a view on a little bit later is that you can write tests now with JUnit 5 and with, for example, this Kotlin DSL as well against your web application. But the URL to find this Sap Ui5 Web Components is here shown. It's on GitHub, so Vardin-developer is the organization, and then the project is Sap -ui5-4-flow. It's a way too long name. Well, give me an idea what should be in shorter name. So this is one. The next thing is that we want to start going to this testing part. What are the possibilities? And from this we want to go to the security part, what we are getting with this one. But for this, I will change the location. Testing web components means that you have a quite complex stack. If you want to test web components on the Java side, then you want to have access to JUnit 5 or your tooling you like. How to do this one? If you are able to map web components on the Java side, as we saw before, how this is done, then you have already a class that you can use inside your JUnit 5 test. But is this everything you want to do? If you're just connecting with JUnit 5 to a Java class, and then you are just ignoring that there's a whole stack behind, for example, the whole web stack, then you can test, for example, the logic inside the Java class, but you are missing the browser stack, the whole stack there at this one. So what do you need if you want to test web apps? First of all, you need a ramped up web app where all this stuff is running, so that you have this servlet container or your web app, whatever is running there. Then you need a browser, because with a browser you have to consume these pages. And then there is a de facto standard called Selenium, and with Selenium you can start a robot that is just invoking the actions you want to have. For example, clicking on a button, open combo box, whatever. And the last thing what you need is a test definition. So what you want to have is a workflow that is tested again and again. For example, go to the first text field, write the name, go to the text field that's called password, type in the password, click the login button. And then you want to check if you have a valid login, if this should happen, or if this is an access denied, if you want to test this one. So it means it really depends on the stuff you want to have, what's the result, but you want to have access to the result itself. So if you're a Java developer, you want to do all this stuff in Java. And how to do this one? There is a free available tool called Caribou DSL. It's a builder, or it's mapping for Vardin Flow, and there is a testing library as well, but this testing approach will just test the Java stack, and this is not enough. I want to focus now on how to test this full stack, and for this we need, right now there is no free tool available, so it's a commercial tool from Vardin. But there are some open source community members that are thinking about rewriting a free version. But how to do it? If you have TestBench, then you have a mapping between the Selenium web element, that is a representative from the page you are navigating through with Selenium, and on the TestBench side you have a corresponding element, a test element. And for example, if you want to test a button, you have on the Selenium side a plain web element, and there is no indication about this is a button. On TestBench you have already a button or a combo box element, so that you have all these methods that are specific for button or for combo box and so on. So how to map now self-mapped web components? if you're looking at this API from TestBench and it's open source, it's not free, but it's open source. So it's very interesting to see how they're talking to the Selenium node and mapping this stuff. And then you will see there's internally a generic API that will give you the possibility to hook in with your own web apps or web components you already mapped. So what you need, the base class is TestBench element. And you just have to extend it. So for example, here I want to test an UI5 switch element. So I'm creating an UI5 switch element class, extends TestBench element. What I need this annotation add element, and inside you have the name of the HTML tag that's used on the client side. Here it's UI5 minus switch. And the next thing is that you have generic methods inside this TestBench element called setProperty and getProperty as string. And here what you can do is you can just use the definitions from your web component you have already and setting dedicated attributes, for example, color scheme or whatever. That's it. So with this you can set on the Java side a value that will be transformed to Selenium, will be invoked on the client side, and it will get back the generic result. So what should you do now? This mapping is quite easy. You have to deal a little bit with serialization, but the next step would be just to activate a workflow so that you're ramping up a full JUnit 5 test. So here what you can do is you can just using JUnit 5 extensions to ramp up a servlet container, to ramp up a WebDriver, or you can do it via test containers, whatever you want, and creating a tag that you can use as an extension at your test class. Here in this example, I'm just have some extension written, servlet container extension, WebDriver and WebDriver param resolver, just to have some possibilities to get the information and this WebDriver and all this stuff. And then you have just a UI5 test with the annotation at Vardin test, Vardin tutorial UI5 test, whatever the name of this annotation is. So how to write a test with this one? So the first one is just how to ramp up the whole ecosystem, the servlet container, this WebDriver stuff and so on. If you are interested here in this one, I have a dedicated tutorial about JUnit 5 custom test engines. This is available on YouTube, so have a look there. And then you will see how to write custom test engines to have the whole workflow quite easily managed. The next thing is that you just have to think about how to get, for example, this WebDriver and how to address this element. So this is just core technology that you're doing always. So I have some dedicated detailed information about this one in the internet. But the main thing is, if you want to have now access to the elements of this dedicated element you're mapping with TestBench element, what you're doing is you are grabbing this test element, or here it's this UI5 switch element. And then you can just invoke the getter and the setter you wrote to have access to these attributes and properties. Or what you can do is you can have access with get element to the complex child element that is added, and then just reading attributes and writing asserts. That's it. So in the end, it's really, really easy to write JUnit 5 tests against self-mapped web components. And having this in mind will open a door for you that you now can map on one side the web components to the Java world. Then you have the full stack that you can use on the Java world, the full convenience to write this one, including server-side state and the communication and all this stuff. But on the other side with TestBench, or have an eye on some open source toolings that are around, that will give you free choices or some other toolings. You have the possibility to go over Selenium to map these attributes back over this generic way. How this is done is shown inside TestBench. I have an example where I'm using this stuff. It's Vardin -developer/SAP UI5 for Flow. the link I will show you here in my slides, and there you can see how this is done, the mapping and the whole stuff. So what is the complex part testing web apps? The complex part is for sure the life cycle itself, how to ramp up the servlet container, how to connect all this stuff, how to manage the zoo of Selenium, for example, is a very good tool to manage Selenium nodes. And then you have just to make sure that this life cycle is good managed, but writing a test against this web component is just a regular JUnit 5 test. Again, have a look at my talk about JUnit 5 custom test engines. It's available on YouTube, and then I will explain how to deal with the lifecycle of this stuff. And otherwise, what you can do if you want to start with this one, because if you're dealing with tests and with test stack, it would be nice that you have a combined repository manager, for example, Artifactory. Just starts a free tier. I have a YouTube video on this, how to start a free tier, and then you can use all this stuff. Because if you're dealing with web components, you have the Maven stack, as you know, and you have the Npm stack. Just don't forget it. This is a complete different beast of technology. On the one side, you have this convenience that you can use it on the Java side. On the other side, you just open a new door for vulnerabilities because you have the full JavaScript Npm stack there as well. So just use the free tier to create a repository there, npm and Maven, then check with the X-ray instance that's part of this free tier if you have some vulnerabilities, and then try to harden them or get rid of them. I have a dedicated YouTube video about how to use the IDE plugin to connect to X-ray. Check out this one, and I have explicit for the Vardin stack a YouTube video about how to harden the Vardin stack with X-ray. And if you're using this one under the hood as a base for the mapping stuff, just have a look at this one and harden your stack as well. I'm now on my way back, so I packed my stuff and I have to leave the forest because slowly sun is going down. It was a long day. See you later. I want to say at this point that this is just a snapshot of today. So what will be known tomorrow about vulnerabilities at Vardin, or what is changed tomorrow, can be completely different. So if you want to have an actual view on this, just do this by yourself again, based on a free trial with Artifactory and X-ray to scan your Vardin framework. Okay, what do we need for this? We need two applications, and I'm using just the default applications that you can generate on the Vardin homepage. You can generate them with the actual current version. In my case, it's version 16, and you can generate the long-term support version based on Vardin 14. I'm analyzing here these two versions, and we will see what we can do as a developer to minimize the known vulnerabilities or the security risk based on the known vulnerabilities. And for this, what you need is a trial of Artifactory and X-ray. You need the base project generated by the Vardin page and an IDE to work on for sure. And I will show you how to do all this stuff. If you want to have a little bit more information about how to create a Maven repository in Artifactory, or how to connect your IDE to the X-ray instance, I created separate videos on this one, and I will give you the link down in the description or here or there. Let's see. Okay, next step would be activating a free tier. With a free tier, you can use all the features I'm showing you today, and you can get this free tier, I think, in 10 minutes. How to get it and what you have to do to get a free tier and access to it, I will show you now. To create a free tier, go to jfrog.com, select Start for Free, wherever you are, and you will come to this page here, Get Started. After this one, select Cloud, which is selected so far. You don't need any credit card information, so it's really for free, so that you can just go here and try it. You can select different cloud providers. I will go with AWS. What you do as next is you're selecting a region. You can do it in different parts of the world. I'm just going here with the first entry for demo purpose. This is a server name, so as you can see here, this will be part of the domain you will have. So here I'm just using now some random stuff. I need an email, I'm using my business email here, some passwords. Here I'm just using something that fulfills the requirements. So here you can see what is needed as minimum. I checked here. I will add my personal informations, selecting country. I'm personally in Germany, and then selecting this one and say proceed. That's it. So now it will take a few seconds, and what you will get is a confirmation email. So after a few seconds you will get this notification that you have successfully registered, and the main thing is that you now have to wait until you will get an email, and inside this email you will get an activation link that you just have to use once. After some time you will get a confirmation email, and this one looks like the following. You will get here this information, hi Sven, whatever, and here you will get a link that you can just copy or open. I will do it here explicit, and voila, I'm activating my free tier. It means that now the instance will be created. Approximately it will take 5 to 10 minutes. After you loaded the URL, you will get with the next email, and the URL is just the domain name plus jfrog.io. That's what you selected by yourself. You're using the email address and the password that you are selected during the activation process. So this will be the first view you see after your first login. You can say don't show me again if you don't want to see it during the next login. I'm just get started. What you can do now is you can start creating the first repository, but this I will cover in another tutorial, so we will skip this one. That's it. So now you have an active free tier instance. Enjoy. During the time this instance will be created, you can go to the Vardin page, vardin.com, and on the build get started, you will get the possibility to create some Hello World projects. So what I've created for this example is a Vardin 14, the long-term support version, but just plain Java, just the minimum version we can have, then download. And after this, Vardin 16, the latest one, and again, have in mind you have to switch back to plain Java. They are just switching it back to Spring Boot, I don't know why. And then download again. So you have now two zip files, and both you can extract in different folders, and in every folder you will be able to find POM.xml. My version is here based the Vardin 14.3.1, and on the 16 version is 16.01. I'm going back to the long-term support version first. So what you have to do is after you got the credentials for your Artifactory and X-Ray trial, you have to create a Maven repository that's a virtual Maven repository that's combining different remote repositories. For example, what you need, one is access to the Maven Central and to the Vardin pre-release repository. So I'm just added both to my libs-release, my virtual repository, that's including this repository as well as this repository, so I can delete the second definition of it. How to create Maven repositories, virtual repositories, and to connect with the IDE plugin, I showed in a different YouTube tutorial. So check out my YouTube channel, Auto-Nerd, or check the links below so that you are able to find those tutorials. As a short recap, here you can add the JFrog plugin, and after this just connect to your instance with your username and password, and then you have the information from X-Ray available inside your IDE. So otherwise nothing changed here. You will find here this Maven dependency and some additional stuff they added. So this is not changed. I will focus here on the Vardin dependency first. So if you have the information from the Maven inside your IDE, you can start the JFrog plugin, and here you will see the project. What I'm totally ignoring right now is NPM world, the JavaScript world. So this is a dedicated YouTube tutorial. So I will focus here just on the Java world, but the principle or the way to do or the way to go is exactly the same. So here, the Java world, I'm checking here the Vardin dependency, for example. Inside the Vardin dependency, I will see different subdependencies or transitive dependencies. I will ignore the commercial here right now. I'm just going to the open source one, the Vardin core. And inside the Vardin core, I have the dependency to Flow Server. And inside Flow Server, for example, I have the issue with HTTP client in this version. What I see here is that this version, here's a short summary of the CVSS or this vulnerability entry. And what you can see is there is already a fixed version 4.5.3 release candidate 1. What you can do here with the plugin, you can first say, show me in this descriptor. It will lead you here to the Vardin dependency because it's a transitive dependency. And then, very convenient, you can say exclude dependency. For this, the dependency is excluded, but now you have to add it by yourself. What I'm personally doing is I have this section called fixed or fix. Then I'm adding here the dependency I excluded and add the new version. And mostly I'm just using the latest one. So if you have a good test coverage, everything is fine because you're just running all tests and you know that the API is compatible and the functionality is still available as well. Here in this example, we have no test coverage, so I'm just adding the dependency because I'm focusing on this dependency management. So then after this one, we are reading the Maven dependency again so that X-Ray is aware of this change. I have to reload it because I deactivated the automatic reload. If you have an automatic reload, this is then you don't have to do it manually. So going back here to the dependency tree, so Vardin, okay, Vardin core and Vardin server, and this HTTP client recommendation is not available, so this one is solved. But have in mind, this one, this HTTP client, can have security issues as well, and it is exactly here because here they are working with an old commons codec and there is a fixed version available. So what we are doing here is just going exclude dependency, this time from this here, from the HTTP client, and again I'm adding a dependency. I'm using the latest version because it's just what I'm doing. And then I'm reloading the definition and checking if it is gone. So, and here we are. This one is solved. There are some other things. For example, if you're going here into the Vardin core, you will see sometimes that, for example, the commons IO, there is a newer version available. So I think it's 2.7 already, but it's not marked as a fixed version so far. The 2.6 definitely is not including the fix. The 2.7 is maybe including the fix. I haven't checked the release notes so far because the fix is already existing. So this is a strange thing here with this project. The fix is existing since a long time. We are talking about months, not only weeks, but it was not included into a release until, I don't know, I checked it last week or so. So maybe it's in the 2.7 and then not marked as fixed already, or it's not included. I don't know, so this you have to check, but you will come to this point that you have sometimes no fixed version, and then it really depends what you want to do. If you want to go to an older version, for example, if this is possible, and then no security issue, or you're just waiting or making this dependency explicit or whatever. So you have to deal with this anyway. So this was for the Vardin 14, so we had just a few. And the surprising thing is that in the Vardin 16, we have a lot of security issues. Now, for example, here the original one is just going up to 123 security issues, and the most is really inside Vardin and inside Vardin core. So not in the commercial part, it's really in the open source part, inside the Vardin server. And what you have an eye on is mostly everything that is dealing with serialization stuff. And here the bad boy is just the Jackson data binding, or the whole Jackson data binding family here. And then you have to do exactly the same. So you start with excluding, adding the next one, checking this one, and so on. So I've done this. So I created 2 repositories on GitHub. I will give you the link here down in the description. And then you can just use this one for your own, or just group your own project and start analyzing it. Yeah, that's it so far from the screencast. And yeah, again, have in mind that this is just a snapshot of today. So maybe tomorrow you will have a new version of Vardin and a lot of stuff fixed, or maybe you have more security issues reported. So you never know. This is something you really have to check on a regular basis. And yeah, just try it by yourself. We saw how we can work against the security issues based on Artifactory and X-Ray database so that we can analyze our tech stack. For this example, I worked with Maven, but it's the same if you're working with NPM or other dependency management technologies. So have in mind that the workflow is always the same. Identify the dependency, replace them by dependencies with less security issues, and hopefully they are compatible with your application. This means quality is always your best friend, even if you're working in the field of security, because changing dependencies and then testing or verifying with a good test coverage is always good. So far, I would like to have you as my subscriber, and I would really appreciate for a thumbs up. I will give way more sessions here on this series, DevSecOps, but I have other ones like TDD Extreme about JUnit 5 or about functional reactive in core Java. So to get all the new information, I have a mailing list because I'm giving free talks, I'm giving free webinars and all this. And if you're subscribing my mailing list, you are one of the first that are able to grab a free slot at these events as well. So, see you.
These forest pictures, and you could hear the birds singing in the background. So that was a very calming experience, I would say. And yeah, thanks a lot for giving this great talk, Sven. So I actually have some questions. So first of all, especially since I'm typically more on the Java side, or the Java enterprise side of things, from your experience, how well do regular Java developers take up these new technologies, especially if they're not that familiar with front-end development and UI, HTML, and web components? From your experience, how well do they do at when getting used to these new APIs, specifically with Vardin?
Well, Vardin has a long history in targeting the Java server-side developers. So the API is really from Java developers for Java developer. This for sure. So even if you have this old Vardin version, and one really good thing is that the version that is from 2009 or whatever until now not really changed. So this is something that's really good for the Java developer. Coming back to your question, if you're looking at, or if you're exploring other technologies like Wicked, Tapestry, or whatever, they have this component approach, and they want to map it on the Java side. But all these other frameworks are found, they are more or less, you have to write this HTML template, and then you have to write a corresponding Java class, and this must match. And if you have something, naming convention or whatever, you just start searching and debugging in a web app. And debugging in a web app is sometimes just time consuming. And the other thing is, with this approach here, what I saw in legacy projects is this is quite often used in transformations from Swing to web or whatever, so desktop technologies, because you could mostly extract the first layer under the Swing layer and transform it into a web application one by one. So the guy who is mapping this custom components need to know a little bit about this web technologies for sure, because there's something not right, there's a push not coming, whatever. So you have to dig down a little bit. But everybody who's just using it mostly is very happy, because it's really, you start this app, you set a breakpoint, you can debug, and this is very convenient.
That makes sense. And a little bit connected to that, because it's also from my experience, I'm not that much working with security. And also from what I've seen, it's sometimes hard to motivate developers to even care about security, right? It's sometimes taken as, it's like testing or documentation, right? It's something we need to do, but most people aren't really that enthusiastic about it. And especially since you now have a very strong security like background, like, I mean, always, but now especially more your focus. Like, what is your experience? Like, how can we motivate ourselves and other developers to care more about like that topic of security, rather than just that it's something annoying that we have to do?
Yeah. So first of all, never create a report that is just created and nobody is taking action out of it. Then just delete it, because then it's better if you can just sleep well, if you don't know what's happening in your system, if you're not dealing with this. But the main system here, the main point here is that security, if you're looking at all these stacks, let's assume cloud native. You have this app, this is maybe a Java app written and managed by Maven. Then you have Linux as underlying operating system, and then you have this Debian repositories. Then you have this Docker stack, and then you have Docker repositories, and then this Kubernetes stack for scaling and all this stuff, and this is Helm chart. If you're looking and analyzing how much of this whole stack is just a dependency, then you will see that we are talking about 90%. So in the app, you have maybe some percentage of written codes, the rest is dependency. But on Linux, you're just adding a few configurations, the rest is dependency. On Docker, you're just writing a from statement and then some commands, so it's scripting. On the Kubernetes, it's more or less the same. So it means the really low-hanging fruit for security is scanning dependencies. This is the one thing. So don't start with machine learning as your own source code, because machine learning and AI and all this stuff, it's really a good technology, but it's an early stage. So it will take some time, let's say 5 years or whatever. So that's a rock solid thing. It's the same with dynamic generated test coverage. There are some techniques around, but if you're just going with mutation testing, then you have just a freaking good test coverage. Yeah? So don't use this one. So coming to the point, why security? How security? It's the same like a good test coverage. It's your safety belt. So if you have a good test coverage, you can just switch dependencies. If you can just switch dependencies, you can just avoid vulnerabilities. And the other thing is most people in security focusing on the CI. So it means you're writing a proof of concept the whole day, you wasted already time, and then the CI would say no. So this is just a bunch of money that's burned. So what you need is this Ide integration. And this is what I really like with this Ide integration. You're just having an idea. You say, oh, I need a PDF library. You're adding a PDF library you're always using, and then you see, oh, it's fine, or no. And this for compliance as well as for vulnerabilities. Then it's easy to use. So answer to your question, yes, it's like TDD. You have to change yourself, but it must be done inside the IDE. And otherwise, it's just something. Yeah?
Something that would annoy you, yeah. So basically saying like, similar to other concerns, like try to shift left to have it earlier in your stage of development, that you immediately see, while, for example, using in your IDE, there's such a plugin or something like that, that you immediately see, okay, let's better not use this dependency. Let's immediately search for something else until you invested a lot of time and effort in, for example, using a dependency, using a library, and then you like tackle the issue earlier on, I guess.
Yeah, so it's the other thing that is mostly what I try to explain here is with convenience, we are wrapping technologies. Wrapping technologies is good because you are increasing your productivity, and this is a time to market. But time to market in the same way for a developer is getting the known vulnerability of the information from the information is consumable to running in production. It's the same time to market. So it must be just fast. That's one thing. That means technology must be convenient. Convenient means wrapping other technologies. Here, you just have the convenience. You can immediately work with the whole team on the use case, but you're wrapping web technologies, and JavaScript NPM is a beast. Check it only once for security issues. So you will find a few things, and then we are not talking about compliance. This is a just different thing. So this means you need tools that are analyzing the whole stack. So you need the full impact graph, because different vulnerabilities can be combined to attack vectors. And that means if you have just partially a view on Docker, then you are ignoring the rest. But you need everything from the first line of code up to running in production, the whole impact graph.
Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense, and also it's somewhat just a motivation for us developers to care a little bit more about this topic, but also then care it in a way like testing to just improve confidence, I guess, and improve the overall quality of what you will produce and what you will ultimately deploy to production, so that we all just are there to create a better development world, I guess.
Well, let's make it easy. So same with quality. If you start in the beginning, it's like an algorithm. If you're choosing the wrong algorithm, you can tweak the technical implementation. A better algorithm, worse implemented, will always beat. So
awesome. Yeah, so thanks a lot for answering these questions, Sven. Now we have our host back.
Sven, thank you so much for this talk. It was really great and really nice. And I think you created such nice atmosphere with this forest and all these sounds, birds. That was great. And Sebastian, thank you also so much for your questions and very good discussion with Sven. Really nice. So I wish you a good day. Dankeschön. Tschüss. Bye-bye.
Dankeschön. Tschüss.